From the arena to the front office, this is Scoreboard. I'm Chris Titley, and each episode brings you stories from the game of sport, where mindset, money, and meaning shape what comes next. Athletes, coaches, owners, and business leaders unpack the moments that matter, because the Scoreboard isn't just about winning, it's about life beyond the game. Now let's get to this week's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and in this week's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast, I'm joined by Brad Thorpe, the inventor of ISOPHIT, all the way from Canada. Brad, thank you so much for being part of this series.
Chris, I appreciate it, and it's great to connect finally.
Absolutely. Now, ISOPHIT, before we get into the details of ISOPHIT, I'm interested to know how your 2025 has started.
Man, I've had such a great year, to be honest. It's been fabulous. Normally, I'm on the road. So far this year, I've only managed to spend about a month away so far. But from now until the end of the year, I'm pretty much in and out of Canada until about December 15th. So I'll probably be gone for 8 months of the remaining months.
And Brad, lots of travel. And Brad, we're on the Scoreboard podcast, and we've been interviewing athletes for about 40 odd episodes. And more recently, we've interviewed some CEOs of leagues and teams. And you are the first sports tech, sports enabler, sports stakeholder podcast. So congratulations.
Oh, thanks, buddy. I appreciate that.
And we are talking ISOPHIT. So I would love to know all about ISOPHIT and how it fits into the sports ecosystem.
Well, realistically, so ISOPHIT, what it is an immovable wall. Like I usually reference it as a fancy wall, but it's a motion restraint device that athletes across all spectrums of sport are gravitating to because it helps them not only improve performance, but it helps them, recover faster. It prevents them from getting injured as frequently. And it also, in the event that they are injured, it helps them recover a lot faster. So it kind of really is the ultimate performance tool. So we're very, very fortunate in that sense.
And Brad, you are the inventor of ISOPHIT. I'm curious as to know your background and how this came about.
So my background, I went to school for cardiovascular rehabilitation at a college in Toronto. And from there, just studied under some of the world's foremost experts in exercise science and sort of physical rehab. And from there, I had a couple of my clients walk in one day and say, "Hey, Brad, there's no wall space to do my prescribed isometrics at our local gym." And it was like, oh, okay. Well, so there was an immediate sort of problem. And we came up with a solution that allowed us to perform isometrics. So we're literally pushing into something that doesn't move in an open space. So what it did, it made something that traditionally, like sports performance coaches and athletes would find problematic in setting up because it takes too long to set up, so they'd lose interest. And we have a solution that allows you to do literally millions of exercises within seconds. It just basically is a motion restraint device, as I said. So you're pushing into an immovable object, and you just work around it. So a lot of stuff, when you look at resistance training, people forgot why they put like a dumbbell or a weight in their hand. They, in their brain, think it's to move the weight, as opposed to it's to resist the movement that they're trying to create. So it's a subtle nuance. But, so with the isometric space, we were very, very fortunate in the sense that because we were early adopters, we were managed to get, I think I'm up to 24 patents on the subject area. So we've got a lot of patents, which doesn't allow people to play in our sandbox, which is good and bad to some degree.
So the concept to actual production, you want to take me back to those days, and I suppose the progress in terms of the ups and downs of the business.
No, the ups and downs, it's daily. It's I'm bipolar would be the best way to describe a day in my life. Some aspects are really good. Some aspects are really bad. It depends on whether we're talking about shipping, manufacturing, client fulfillment, client management. The beautiful thing is we're currently in about 40 countries, small footprint, but we have just under 1,000 of the coolest clients you'd ever dream of. And that ranges from teams across like the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball now, the NFL over in North America, getting well adopted into the European sort of sport leagues and stuff like that as well. And also now branching out down into Australia. But each day is something uniquely interesting. We moved our manufacturing over to China in 2023, so just about a year and a half ago, and it's been nothing but absolutely fabulous. However, with recent tariff wars, over the last sort of really kind of 3 weeks, my duties and tariffs have gone from 20% to 140 or 145 effective today if I'm bringing it into the United States. So that has an immediate impact on, just our profit margins and, the consumer impact, because realistically that tariff gets passed over to the consumer at the end of the day. So they end up having to pay a slightly higher fee for a product that hasn't changed since yesterday, but now they're paying, 40% more, which, I'll leave that to the governments to do what they want. But what it does for us, it allows us to sort of say, hey, well, maybe we'll look to build up the Australian market. So we got a shipping container full of product heading down there. We have a small footprint in Australia, but from a patent perspective, we've been patented in Australia since 2011 for various sort of like ISOPHIT products. And we're pretty committed for the next sort of several years into the Australian space. I was back in Australia in October of last year for about 18 days and just was reconnected with the beauty of not only the country, but just the genuineness of the people. I do miss that. It's, it doesn't hurt to be able to walk to any beach, pretty much within a half hour. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for those kind words on Australia, and we welcome you back down under at any point in time. Your interest in Australia in terms of leagues, in terms of sports, in terms of athletes, do you want to talk about that, how that came about and how the progress is thus far?
Well, the nice thing is for sport, so when you're looking at human movement, so we'll just talk about the physiology of why ISOPHIT is so valuable to athletes. So before you move dynamically within the muscle structure, so isometrics is a named contraction. And what happens is the muscular system contracts isometrically first, and then you move second. So realistically, it doesn't matter what sport, whether it's surfing, whether it's basketball, whether it's rugby, AFL, or, league, we help all of those athletes perform at an optimal level. We also work with some of the world's top sprinters. And one of the things that I know because you've seen it on social, but there's this wonderful young man by the name of Gout Gout who's just taking the Australian sports scene by storm. So we started working with him in December. So we're very, very fortunate to work with some of the world's fastest young athletes. We've had athletes, in the Olympics last year, 100-meter sprinters and stuff like that. So he's not our first athlete in the sprint world that we've worked with. But we're also in basically auto racing as well. So a 5-time sort of time attack world champion, a guy by the name of Barton Maurer, he's a 5-time champion. He's been using ISOPHIT for about 3 years now. And when they're looking at sort of sport performance in the auto sector, what they're doing with the sort of the time attacks sort of speeds, like they're approaching, the forces associated with like F1 when they're going into the banking and stuff like that. And, he basically gave us a beautiful little testimonial shout out, because if it wasn't for ISOPHIT, he wouldn't be able to tolerate the forces associated with auto racing to the same level as conventional training. Because the goal with isometrics, and specifically ISOPHIT, the goal is to teach you how not to move. And when you look at things like ACL injuries, they are a response to the body moving on a fixed lower limb. So with Australia currently having to be honest, it's an epidemic of ACL injuries in youth sport, I believe we can eradicate many of those unnecessary injuries just by changing how individuals approach training, both from an athlete perspective as well as a strength and conditioning coach perspective. And that's simply by adding isometrics. And we see that across the board with our athletes that we work with. And, as I said, we have just under 1,000 of the coolest clients. And a lot of people, they don't think, well, it's only 1,000. That's not that many. But we're with the U.S. Army. We're with the FBI. As I said, we're with a whole bunch of these pro teams. So a lot of our clients, when you look at the cascading effect, have tens of thousands of people underneath them, using our product and stuff like that. So it is quite, self-fulfilling, to be honest.
Yeah, we're very excited about Gout Gout and the Nationals in Perth over the weekend. Some unbelievable times. There's a little bit of wind adjustments that didn't make them recorded as official times, etc., or records, etc. But super excited being from Brisbane here to see this 17-year-old sensation take the world by storm, and hopefully ISOPHIT continues to play a role in his progress.
I hope so. I mean, we got Brisbane 2032 coming up, right? So, the goal, and I'll speak for him and his team. My goal for him is to set the world record well before Brisbane.
Well, he's on that trajectory right now. We're talking LA 28, not Brisbane 32, but hopefully
exactly,
both.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Australian sports scene it's on fire. I mean, you look at, obviously the world's talking about sprinting, but you got some of the best basketball players in the world now coming out of Australia. It's just, to be honest, it's fascinating. And as I mentioned, we're with 8 professional NBA teams as of now. So some of the Australians, that sort of play over in the NBA, some of them sort of use ISOPHIT that I'm aware of. With the Cleveland Cavaliers, I forget his name. It's Luke, I believe. Luke.
Yeah, Luke Travers. He played a fair bit in the G League team, but also got a bit of time this year.
Yeah,
and obviously heading into the playoffs now, Cleveland, he might get a bit more airtime in the playoffs. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been with the Cavs for 3 years now. So we've watched them go from, a decent team to now being a juggernaut within the league. And the same with the Houston Rockets as well. So we've been with them sort of the same amount of years. And both of those clubs are the ones with the largest, volume of ISOPHITs within the club. And now it's team sport. So there's many factors. There's, obviously talent acquisition. There's new coaches and new philosophies. But one of the common things we're seeing is individuals who get ISOPHIT then improve. And that's pretty cool. And the beautiful thing about being in the sport world, like the first professional team that picked us up was a team out of Lyon, France. And they're known as the Lyon Asphalt. And that's Tony Parker's basketball team. And Tony Parker, as you know, is, a Hall of Fame basketball athlete from San Antonio Spurs. And, when he injured his, quadricep tendon, when he tore it, many years ago, he did a bunch of his rehab on ISOPHIT. That's going back to about 2017. So we've been in the sports space, for about 8 years now. And each year it's just getting bigger and better athletes are using it. And it's, I can't think of many sports we're no longer in, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's been you mentioned about the Houston Rockets finishing second in the Western Conference this year from a couple of years ago, finishing right at the bottom. And you also mentioned about the Spurs, and one of their lead players, Victor Wembanyama, was out the last quarter of the season with some injuries. So maybe ISOPHIT can help him.
Well, the unfortunate part, so he wasn't injured per se. He had a blood clot, which is, so that was a little bit of a different scenario, and we were fortunate enough to be able to sort of work with and supply Team France for the Olympics. And so I know that Victor has used ISOPHIT in the past, with the Team France, as well as all the other team members and stuff like that. And with being sort of with the Lyon Asphalt since 2017, Victor sort of went through that organization when he was a youth athlete as well, and also played with them when they, was the last time they won the French championships. I believe they may have won it once since then. But yeah,
he would probably have been about 16 or 17 or something before he got drafted at a very, very early age. Now, ISOPHIT, the use case, how do people baseline themselves? What exercises they do? Where do they get this information from?
So with the programming that comes with the product, so we created a program called 30 and 30. So it's a great foundational program. So it's 30 isometrics exercises in 30 minutes. So you're looking at 10 exercises for your lower body, 10 for your core, 10 for your upper body. So it's kind of a generic program that allows athletes really to hone in on just generating force throughout their entire body. So So a lot of people, what they do is they'll segment their training philosophy, and they're like, oh, we're going to do lower body one day, core the next day, upper body, another day. And realistically, they never touch upon the tissue enough to get adaptive change. They'll have hard workouts, but it's not enough to sort of create the change, not only to the muscular system, but you also have to think about the nervous system, the actual sort of connective tissue, the tendons, the bone structure. So a lot of stuff that we do from an exercise perspective, it's hard, but it actually doesn't prepare us for the sport that we're playing. And we end up getting injured quite frequently. Now, that's unfortunate when you think about it, because the simple solution is just to add the isometric component. And what I recommend to the individuals is daily, because you want to touch upon these tissues, because those are the ones that are going to prevent deformation. They're the ones that are going to allow you to sort of generate force, tolerate force, transfer force, and most importantly, for an athlete, express force. And the one guarantee that I can make anybody that uses our product is those 4 pillars we're going to improve. And it doesn't matter the level of sport you're currently at, whether you're a novice, athlete, or you're in the professional ranks. We see it across the board within weeks, not months, not years. We see a noticeable change in their performance literally within the first week. And people are like, that's not possible. It's like, well, maybe the way you're doing it's not possible. We see it all the time. And that's why, as I said, we're fortunate in the sense that, A, the people that we get to work with, but just the people that call us on a daily basis now, where it's like we traditionally have never had a sales team. We actually just started with our new head of business development today. And he's a wonderful, wonderful man. His name's Dan Braun. And he hosts a podcast, and that's actually how we got connected probably about a year and a half ago. And Dan, he's a physical therapist by education, like a doctor of physical therapy. And so he's helped me over the last sort of basically a year and a half, doing trade shows and stuff like that, and always been like my right-hand man. And it was like last week, it's like, hey, we need to expand this relationship. So he's come on board as our head of business development. And today, day one, he's sent me over a quote for 20 units from Division I university in the United States. And that's like day one. It's like, oh, wow, thanks, Dan. You're amazing. He's got like 13 meetings this week with D1 programs. People are excited to meet with us because of the sort of the relationships that we have, the individuals currently using our product in North America. And the price point, to be honest, the price point's not offensive. Where you look at the versatility of the product and the outcomes that it creates, like a lot of exercise equipment, when you're looking at it, especially when you get into stuff that has data monitoring and force acquisition and all that sort of stuff, you're pushing $100,000, and stuff like egregious numbers. Where you're looking at what we're charging, it's like $2,200. So like virtually, I'm not going to say it's virtually free because that would be insulting to people. But it's not like your standard selectorized piece of exercise equipment that's usually around $4,800. So, those single-use products as opposed to ISOPHIT, as I said, you can train every muscle at every muscle length in the human body.
And Brad, from a different sport vertical point of view and different leagues, you talked about the collegiate system in the US. So I'm interested to know what sort of a good athlete or a good player in a particular sport has in terms of force versus other sports, and can people collect some sort of baseline data to say, oh, well, actually, Gout's at this level, maybe you should be at this level to get to the X level to kind of be up there?
So we don't deal with that side of it. We have relationships with, whether it's Hawkins Dynamics or, I don't have a relationship with Bald, who is just in your backyard. They're just outside of Brisbane. So We don't necessarily have a working relationship with them. However, their products do easily act like they're applicable to ISOPHIT in the sense that we're a hardware company, and you can add their force plates onto the ISOPHIT. So we have a number of customers that we share. So they love using the Bald product with the ISOPHIT. So from a force data monitoring perspective, we don't really touch upon it. However, we do sort of hear from our trainers, our sport coaches and everything like that, that the numbers become, overwhelmingly evident that they've had improvement. within a short period of time. So.
Yep. No, I know. I've known Laurie for many years at Val. He's doing a good job there, and I've used some of their equipment recently at a physiotherapist, and I didn't register so well, unfortunately. So I've got a baseline level for my ankles and my hemis, but my core muscles are not so good. So maybe I need to get into some ISOPHIT as well. Brad, I'm interested to know about just touching on the collegiate system, the importance of sport. We've seen a major change in the last couple of years with the name, image, likeness of collegiate players, college sport, that some quarterbacks, etc., now getting paid millions of dollars in endorsements, etc. But injury prevention, injury management is so important. I'm interested to know around your views on the collegiate sport system now in the US.
As I'm navigating it, it's ever changing. So that's one of the interesting things as well. It's probably more turbulent than the tariff system right now, is how I'd phrase it. So each athlete, and with the transfer portals, you don't have necessarily an athlete for 4 years anymore. You're lucky to get them for a 2. And the talented athletes are usually, one and done if you're talking about basketball. Football, you get a little bit longer just because the guys need to sort of gain size, gain experience. And the NFL is a tough, business to crack, just because their elite talent is so good. And an 18-year-old kid, he's not going to be able to withstand the forces of, a 30-year-old, offensive lineman is 360 pounds, running through him. Like one of our recent clients is an offensive lineman. He's 6'9" and 315 pounds, and he has no fat. He's not like one of these guys that you look at and go, "Wow, he looks like some sort of, for lack of a better word, slob." No, this guy looks like a piece of granite that's 6'9" and 315, and it's like, who wants to run into you? And he's the small guy on the offensive line. But they raised them big. Some of the kids are just massive now. But with one of our kids last year that we worked with, so we worked with the University of, not Oklahoma, University of South Carolina, the Gamecocks, and they brought ISOPHIT in to help with this one kid, and the kid is 23 years old, and basically he was sort of coming off a year of injury, went through the transfer portal, ended up with the Gamecocks. And Raheem sort of Sanders is his name, his moniker is Rocket. So he's 6'1", 6'2", that window, but he played his last collegiate year at 245 pounds as a running back. So just a massive man. And we helped him get through, obviously, once again, a component of his treatment therapy. But he was the NCAA Comeback Player of the Year. So he basically did his rehab, continued using ISOPHIT consistently, and then this year at the NBA Combine, so he wasn't the quickest time in the 40-yard dash, but he did achieve the fastest mile per hour. And when you look at that and you go, okay, if you're 6'2" and he slendered down, he was, I think, 219 at the Combine, but still 219 pounds at running 23.55 miles per hour is what he reached. I wouldn't
can't drive that.
Can you imagine that being hit by that or having him run into you? Just incredible. So hopefully he goes within the first sort of 3 rounds. So that would be just an incredible feat for him. But to have a small part in that, I think, would be pretty awesome as well.
And Brad, you mentioned about the benefits of athletes using ISOPHIT, and we're in a society where athletes are on Instagram, their personal brands, they're building themselves, their reputations, they're also trying to be high peak performance at the same time, maximising their value as a person with brands, etc. How important is it for you over the next coming while to get some testimonials, to get some people on Instagram and social media to be a bit more aware of ISOPHIT, to get that sort of flywheel working?
It's starting. We've been very fortunate in the sense that we've had a lot of word of mouth growth now, which has allowed us to get to the extreme like the upper crust of human performance. So that we have, and to get to the lower levels, to the masses is where, from a business perspective, is really where we transcend and become a global brand. We're probably about a year and a bit away from that, but yeah, we get contacted almost daily with individuals sort of saying, hey, we want to sort of rep you, we want to be your ambassador. So we're approaching that different than most people. We have a program that we're about to launch called ISOPHIT Cares. And what ISOPHIT Cares is, the goal is basically to take 10,000 athletes and get them a ISOPHIT unit at a substantially reduced cost. The program cost to them is going to be about $500 US. So we're basically subsidizing their program as well. So they'll get 2 years worth of athletic training. They'll get an ISOPHIT, and in return, they will have basically a responsibility to put out two social media posts, basically 2 social media posts per month for 2 years. So nothing huge. But what it does allows us is to help a ton of people. So I mean, if you look at the vested, like the cost that it would cost to do all that, it's about $144 million. I don't have $144 million, but I can give away $144 million worth of value, and we can help these kids reduce their injury rates. We can help these kids improve their performance. And most importantly, we can help them make a ton of money through other people paying for them through their their name, image, and likeness, right? Because at the end of the day, the thing that differentiates most great athletes from the person you've never heard of is injury. Right? That's
True.
It.
Oh no, that's a great point. I think that's a fabulous way of explaining it, because there's people get cut short all the time. There's documentaries, and there's people you go, oh, they could have been and they never were because of an ACL or because of an Achilles, or ACL's very big in the AFL at the moment, as you mentioned before in Australia. It seems to be a bit of a pandemic, epidemic, or whatever you want to call it.
It's brutal, and it's actually worse than you think of it. There's a 20-year longitudinal study that they just, I believe it was the Australian Institute of Sport, or one of the acclaimed sort of institutions you guys got down there. So they basically forecasted that by 2030, the rate of ACL injuries in Australia, and it was written in 2018, so we're going back a couple of years. So by 2030, the rate of injury in Australia would double, right? Which is just egregious on every level. Now that's a combination of new athletes coming in, athletes sort of looking at going, oh, I'm going to be the next great thing in this sport. So they now, instead of playing multiple sports, they're now sort of laser focused on one sport, which obviously isn't good for youth athletes. But the scariest part about their report was the highest growth rate or demographic for ACL injuries was adolescent kids, like little children between the ages of 5 and 14. Yeah, it's absolutely disgusting the way I look at it. Like, I look at that as child abuse, because if you're a child and you have an ACL injury, let's say by the time you're 13, you've torn your ACL, you're 86% more likely to have a total knee replacement by the time you're 40. And that's not fun. That's not sport. That's not it's just abuse in my world. And obviously I have a strong opinion associated with that, because I don't think hurting kids, and that's not the goal. And let me be clear. That's not the goal of putting your kid in sport. However, what are we doing wrong that these kids are no longer prepared for this? Because this wasn't, like, I know, like when I was a kid, I knew 2 kids, maybe all throughout high school, that maybe tore their ACL. I was like, oh, what's that? Like, it was like, I didn't even know what it was. Nowadays it's so commonplace that it's like, oh, you tore your ACL, oh, that's fine. Oh, you tore it again, oh, that's good. Oh, you got at least 2 more before you're really bad off. And it's like, no, that's unacceptable. So in my world, anyways.
We've also seen in cricket, there's a number of stress fractures as well for young fast bowlers. They're putting their weight through, and there's workload management tools now, not when I was growing up, but certainly a bit more around that. So that era, sort of like 13, 14, 15, as the boys and girls grow as well, the load goes through it, which brings me on to my next question about how early ISOPHIT is deemed for people to use.
Oh my God, you should be doing it as soon as you start sport. You should actually do it 6 months before you even consider sport. So one of the issues when you're looking at sort of these bone fractures you just sort of mentioned, so muscles attached to bone via tendon. And if you haven't taken the time to build up the foundation of the tendinous structure, the bone is actually going to be weaker. The force transference is going to dissipate. But the muscle is still going to get pretty strong, right? Because you're doing all these wonderful things. So what we're doing is we're teaching these kids to get, quicker, faster, stronger, but yet more fragile. And a lot of that just comes back to the methodologies of which we're using from a training perspective. I know this is not a popular comment among the sport world, but we're focused on mobility more so than we're focused on actually creating the strength to control the mobility. Once again, it's a subtle nuance, but every change of direction requires you to stop moving in the original direction, right? It's just simple physics. So if you have vector going in one way, and then you change director and have a new vector, where you sort of touch that second end the vector to the original vector, if you don't stop, you continue going through that way. And that's when you end up getting these sort of, non-contact ACL injuries. Or, if we stay on the bones sort of subject, if I'm rapidly rotating and I don't have that ability to control the actual spine structure, what will stop it is the bone structure of the vertebral body above it, right? Because you have these things that come off the back called your transverse processes. They kind of stick outside, but you have a spinous process, and then you have all these little facet joints that just get jammed up, and when you start to do these things repeatedly at a young age, and specifically with youth athletes who aren't fully mature, so their bone structure is still adolescent, it's not fully formed, it's just going to basically break down. And one sport that's wickedly popular for that, obviously you mentioned cricket and fast bowling, so there's that, but tennis, the amount of young kids now that are having significant lumbar spine issues, where literally the vertebral bodies are starting to fracture, and they're 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. Once again, and it's just that quest for that $0 if you're in the U.S. Anywhere else, it's I'm going to put my kid through, and they're going to make so much money. It's yeah, one or two kids might get that, but 10,000 kids are going to be hospitalized. And it's just, to be honest, once again, it's just brutal.
No, it's. I mean, I'm 44. Growing up, sport was, yes, you wanted to make it big and be a star, but it wasn't really for the fame and the money. It was more along the lines of, I want to play cricket for Australia because that would be the best, just to go out in front of 100,000 people and play cricket. It wasn't sort of like, I want to play cricket potentially. And I'm not saying that kids growing up are thinking about the money, but there's more fame and fortune with social media and types of content that people see and the various levels of excitement and branding and merchandising, and the money's obviously got a whole lot better. Now, in this podcast, I do have two questions that I ask guests, and we're on to the final two questions. And the first one is your scoreboard moment. And the scoreboard moment is about a moment in your life which is very, very clear, which may have pivoted the direction of your life, or it may have been something quite significant that you remember. It's almost like you took a photo or an Instagram at that time and forever you'll remember it. Brad, I'm interested to know what your scoreboard moment is.
Literally walked up to a gentleman, and I was working at a gym when I was probably about 28 years old. I'm 51 now. His name's Grant Roebuck, and he just sold his company for something like $300 million. So not chump change, and I'm going to value his opinion. And so we got talking, and Grant he looks at me and goes, "Hey, Brad, so what do you want to do when you grow up?" I'm 28 years old. I'm a personal trainer in Toronto, and I came up with the idea. It's hey, I want to open my own gym. He's like, "That's great. Why would I leave this gym to go to your gym?" And it was probably the most eye-opening question I've ever been asked in my life. And after literally a couple minutes of pondering, and he's just looking at me like, "Oh, he's actually really thinking about this." And I came up, "Well, because I'm a nice guy." He's like, "Well, you are a nice guy, but you need to go differentiate yourself. I'm not going to uproot my routine to go to your gym because you're a nice guy. So how about you go differentiate yourself? And that started me on this little quest. So that was, call it, part one. So I studied under the world's foremost expert in exercise mechanics. I got some certifications in a form of therapy called muscle activation techniques, which at the time, and we're going back to 2002 through, is when I started both of these programs, finished both of them about 2006. So at that point, I was the 21st person in the world with my dual designations. So that was kind of cool. I got to study with some of the world's elite strength coaches and performance experts. So that was defining from an identity perspective, pat myself on the back. I did this. I achieved this. But a couple of years later, one of the things that I was sort of struggling with personally, I was diagnosed with hypertension or high blood pressure when I was 19 years of age. And for 14 years, I was struggling. Went to school for cardiovascular rehabilitation, as I mentioned. I was struggling with hypertension myself, couldn't resolve it, wasn't going to take medication because they said the exit strategy was you'd be on this for life. So that was like, I'm not a fan of pharmaceuticals personally. Obviously, they help people. But for myself, not a chance. In 2007, I heard about a study that said isometrics was good for lowering blood pressure. And historically, they would say it was contraindicated if you had hypertension. Do not do isometrics because it increased your likelihood of a stroke or a heart attack. So I didn't do it for me. We used it for neuromuscular re-education for injured patients and clients that I was dealing with. We used it for sport performance. But for myself, didn't touch it. Heard about this one study, and it was a local to Toronto, so McMaster University. And they prescribed basically 24 minutes of isometrics a week. So their protocol was basically squeeze a tennis ball, a grip strength dynamometer, but a tennis ball works. So to squeeze this dynamometer for 4 repetitions and hold each one at a modest effort for 2 minutes. I was like, so 8 minutes, 3 times a week. Cool, 24 minutes committed time. So I thought myself, being the smart genius guy I am, because I'm like this 21st person in the world with my designations, I was like, why don't I do 20 minutes a day? What could go wrong? I mean, I was told that it would lead to stroke and heart attack, but these guys are telling me different. So after 14 years of dealing with hypertension and all the negative effects that go with that, 2 weeks later, my blood pressure was normalized, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, interestingly, out of, I believe it's Southern Cross University, just by you not so far.
Yep.
There's this gentleman by the name of Neil Smart. He is one of the foremost experts globally on hypertension and isometric exercise. Just an absolute genius. And many of his papers that he puts out are, in the hypertension space, renowned, which is pretty awesome. So Australia is, as I said, it holds a special place in my heart and literally has improved my heart. Because of some of the research that this man has put out in his team, and obviously he collaborates with great people around the world. But that was one of the most pivotal sort of moments, was my conversation with Grant and then reading this study, because that study transformed my life, not only from my own physical being, but the amount of people that we've been able to help potentially avoid things like stroke and heart attack. That's what I'm more proud of. Yes, we work with some of the greatest athletes in the world. Those athletes are also people. And if I can help those people, live a better quality of life going forward. And now one of the buzzwords these days, longevity. Like, everyone's talking about longevity, and it's super important for lifespan and everything like that. Well, isometrics, when they actually look at sort of some of the data, well, individuals that improve their dynamic strength will improve their lifespan by about 14%, which is pretty awesome. Those who have higher levels of isometric strength improve their lifespan by 31%. And that's 221% more than the dynamic side. So if you're really, truly concerned with how you're living your life, you want to be held together properly before you move. And that's where the isometric component comes in. It's the thing that naturally holds you together. It's the natural tone of muscle tissue. And when you understand that and you start to apply it, you look at it and go, wow, we really did miss the boat on this. And thankfully, I've done the deep dive. I've done the obsessive amount of research into the subject area where it's like, yeah, it works effectively. And we've seen it numerous times where we've even helped many people get off medication, right? Which is traditionally, they don't give you an exit strategy. So.
Brad, that's a great moment, and thank you for sharing that. And lots of learnings there about isometrics, which I'll probably have to Google after around how to start and how to begin, etc. Because a fascinating topic for everyone, literally everyone. The other final question is your favorite sporting moment of all time.
Oh man, July 1st, 2019. Wow. Clearly, I got the date wrong. It was last year, 2024. So it was a Monday morning. I had the privilege of going to the University of Gamecocks, or University of South Carolina Gamecocks, their women's basketball program on a Monday morning. They were currently the reigning champions to the NCAA women's champions. And as I said, Monday morning, 7 a.m., July 1st. The season didn't start until October. I would have put money that the national championships was 2 days away. The level of professionalism and detail and nuance of this practice was mind-boggling. And it was like just a practice. And I've been to world championships, and I've been to everything else, but to be behind the scenes of just excellence was incredible. And Molly Benetti's their strength and conditioning performance coach. And so I was a guest of hers because they just picked up some ISOPHITs. And we were doing sort of a 2-day sort of in-service education for their staff and, to showcase it to their athletes. But to sit there and watch these young women just practice basketball and to give you an idea of how many, out of an hour practice, 5 minutes of that practice was the ball touching the ground. It was just court movement. It was just communication. It was passing. It was spacing. And Don Staley is their head coach, an icon in basketball, nothing to do with women, just an icon in basketball. She would just move and everything would stop. And it was like watching an orchestra just perfecting their craft. I would have to say to date, that's probably my most significant sporting moment, which was a Monday morning, 7 a.m. basketball practice.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
And pretty crazy indeed. And sort of the level of intensity, not even, as you mentioned, not even for a game coming up with the season so far away. Brad, thank you so much for being on Scoreboard, the podcast, and sharing your views about stories from the game of sport, the intersection of business and sport and innovation and technology and life as well, in terms of some advice around, for most people, around what isometrics can do and achieve, and the progress that you've achieved thus far, particularly also in Australia with the recent athletes of Gout Gout, and also the progress that you made in other sports and injury prevention. I wish you all the best in the coming years. Looking forward to sharing your progress and looking forward to sharing a beer with you when you come back to Australia.
I'll be there in October for a month. I'd have to stake you up on that beer. But I appreciate your time and thanks for the opportunity.